Welcome back. Well, a former security branch police officer and an anti-apartheid activist have admitted to lying at the initial inquest when they said they did not witness Neil Aggett being tortured. This emerged at the reopened inquest into Aggett's death in the Johannesburg High Court yesterday. Aggett was found hanging in his cell on the 5th of February 1982. Aggett's family and comrades have always rejected apartheid police claims he committed suicide. Jabulani Ngwenya, who was also detained at the then John Foster Square police station at the time, told the court he witnessed Aggett being tortured. Now, he said he omitted that information during the first inquest out of fear of the security branch. Ngwenya will continue to testify this morning. I'm going to get the very latest from this inquest. Let me bring in Nozintombi Miya, who joins us live from court. Nozi, very good morning to you. So let's just recap and set the scene for what we can expect today. What transpired yesterday?
Well, good morning to you, Blaine. So two very critical testimonies that came out yesterday. The first one was with a former black African police officer, Mohanu Maketa, and he was explaining that at the time he witnessed Aggett being beaten and tortured and being made to jump up and down, do exercises while being beaten with a newspaper and what also sounded like a belt. And this corroborated Maurice Smithers, one of the detainees, one of the white detainees, Maurice Smithers' testimony earlier this week that he also had witnessed Aggett being tortured by the security police. But what was quite interesting about Maketa's testimony is that he said that he was one of the initial witnesses in the first inquest, and he was told by his superiors at the security police branch not to say anything about what he'd witnessed. So he lied under oath in the first inquest, and he said he lied because he feared for his life, he feared for his job, he feared for his family. And he said that if he had told the truth of what he had seen, he probably would have been detained, arrested, or chillingly enough, he said he would have disappeared and his family would have disappeared. So it was quite interesting to hear the testimony of that one African black security officer. And now this witness that we have on the stand today, Jabu Ngwenya, he was one of the detainees, and he gave quite a chilling account. And he said that between the evening of the 4th of February and the early hours of the morning of the 5th of February, he saw a commotion. He was being interrogated on the 10th floor, and he saw a commotion. A number of security officers came to the interrogation room where Aggett was being interrogated. So he was giving an explanation of the fact that him and Aggett had been interrogated at the same time. They were obviously in different rooms, and he saw this commotion, and it's unusual to him. This is why he started paying attention, and he noticed the difference. And he said all those security officers made sure that they blocked the view of the door leading to the interrogation office, the windows to the interrogation offices, and he knew at that point that it must mean that Aggett had died, and that state security or police security were trying to cover up the fact that Aggett had died. So it's quite unclear because he also says that it's been 38 years, his memory has lapsed, and they didn't have phones, they didn't have clocks, they didn't have watches. So he's unsure in terms of the time, but he does know that in the early hours of the morning, this is the commotion that he saw, and later on the afternoon of the 5th of February, that's when he got information from one of the other security officers that Aggett had died, and it just confirmed his suspicions of what had occurred in the early hours of that morning.
You know, something that also struck me as well as very interesting is that yesterday was the 38th year anniversary of the death of Dr. Neil Aggett, and something that I'm not sure that happens all the time in a court of law is that the court observed a moment of silence to mark the day. What sort of reaction did you get with regards to this?
I must admit, Blaine, the last time that we'd been in court and we'd witnessed something similar to that was the anniversary of the Marikana deaths. And it was quite interesting that an extremely formal type of court inquest paid tribute in such a way and in such stark contrast to the first inquest of 1982, where this court seems to be observing and paying homage to the pain that the Aggett family suffered. But the moment of silence wasn't just about the Aggett family, it was about all the other families whose loved ones had died while in detention, whether through direct murder by the police state or whether by the police fabricating stories of people having hung themselves on their cells or having jumped out of the notorious 10th floor of the John Foster Square. So, it signaled such a change, 38 years on from Neil Aggett's death, 27 years from democracy, and we're seeing the humanity, the humility in which our courts are dealing with these issues that cause such trauma and terror and unspeakable dehumanizing to the detainees, to those anti-apartheid activists, and to their families. So it really was a moment. It was a win for democracy, and it was also a win for the Aggett family, Blaine.
According to reporting, there was this heated debate, I understand, between the state and prosecutors, whereby the prosecutors believe that the state is dragging its feet. Can you confirm what transpired with regards to that?
So in the past 3 weeks, we're roughly halfway through this particular inquest. We probably have about a month more of witness testimony. And we've heard so far testimonies from former detainees, and we've also heard from some of the officered police officers, not the security branch, the officered police officers. And it's so critical for prosecutors to hear testimony from the security branch officers. But the problem is that the state does not seem to be playing ball in the sense that they are giving prosecutors the shaft in being able to furnish the ID numbers or the birth certificate numbers or any other form of identification so that state prosecutors can track down these former security officers. Many of these former security officers have claimed to not have any information. And in tracking down some of them, the one police officer, Arthur B. Conrad, has passed away. So this seems to be the situation where a lot of the security officers have passed away. But there are some who were still there, who were junior officers, who did receive the instructions from their senior officers and who do need to come and account. But it seems as though the state is not playing ball and is not furnishing prosecutors with this information. And this is critical information because we may never know, just based on the other accounts from the detainees, we may never know the truth of what happened. Who ordered the cover-up of Neil Aggett? Why did his interrogation get stepped up to such an extent that Neil Aggett was killed? Because while piecing together the information this week, it's starting to slowly emerge that Neil, about 2-3 weeks before he died, had been electrocuted. And this was unheard of for a white detainee to be electrocuted. The black detainees were electrocuted. So why did they step up Neil Aggett's torture to such an extent? What information did they think Neil had about the underground movement when all eyes had initially been on Barbara Hogan, who had written the closed comrade document? Neil had not had any communication per se with Barbara Hogan. So why did they target Neil particularly? Neil was a doctor. Neil had been working with the people. He was a unionist as well. Why did the state police specifically target him? And it's so critical for state prosecutors to get the information from those security officers who are still alive, who were part of the interrogation and torture of Neil, for them to come to account in court in this democratic court of South Africa and tell the people, the Aggett family, why they stepped up that interrogation against Neil.
There are so many unanswered questions, and you're raising some very pertinent questions indeed, and we wait and see in terms of some of these answers that come out of testimony. Speaking about testimony, Ronnie Kasrils, former minister and anti-apartheid activist, took to the stand yesterday. What sort of light did he shed with regards to this issue?
So Ronnie Kasrils was not detained with Neil Aggett. He'd been detained in the 1970s. But one of the documents that was used in the first inquest was a document called the Nkululeko Freedom Number 2. And this was an SACP document detailing some of the issues around how the SACP wanted transform South Africa. They wanted detainees to hold on and, not to give in, and to make sure that they push the cause of the movement of a free and transformed South Africa. And the officer that was the interrogating officer in the first Aggett inquest used that document to claim that Neil had been a communist spy and thus chose to commit suicide. They doctored about the last 5 paragraphs of that Nkululeko Freedom document, claiming that this was the evidence that they could use to show that they were not party to the death of Neil Aggett. Yeah. So they claimed that in that particular document, the Communist Party, the SACP, was encouraging those who'd been detained to rather commit suicide than tell the truth or tell anything or give any secrets away of the party. But what Ronnie was saying was that this is emphatically not true. He rubbished that completely, and he said there's no way that they could have circulated such a public document and used it as a claim to give detainees the opportunity to commit suicide. So he said that the state security police, as well as government, was trying to cover up their misdeeds and adopted this document and submitted false evidence. So that was why his testimony was quite important, while Ronnie's testimony was quite important yesterday. So today, Jabu Ngwenya is going to continue back on the stand. Yeah. He's under cross-examination, and once Jabu is done, we're going to be hearing from Dr. Stephen Naidu, who was one of the coroners at the time.
As always, Nozi, great summation. Thank you very much indeed for your reporting. Nozintombi Miya live for us in Johannesburg.